can you tell that I love what I do? People are like, yeah. I'm like, I'm not fishing for compliments. How can you tell? And they say, oh, you seem really passionate. You seem to know a lot about, you have a lot of data and you have a lot of, evidence. And we just get this feeling from you. I'm like, okay, great. Look, I'm glad you can get that from me. I love what I do. When you go out there and you're trying to sell your product or service or lead your team, you think they can tell if you believe in what you're doing? So believing in what we're doing is really important. The problem is that I can't just tell you to believe in what you're doing and you will. I need to give you a system.
Welcome to the Rising Leader Podcast, bringing forth the new wave of rising leadership and helping leaders find purpose, connection, and results. This is your host, founder of Alluviance, Alex Priemer. What is up, y'all? Welcome back to the Rising Leader Podcast. And if this is your first time joining us on the show, welcome. We are so grateful to have you here. This is your host, Alex Priemer. And we got a good one today for you. We have the incredible, the amazing Mr. David Priemer. So first off, David, what's up, my friend? Good to see you.
You too, Alex. Yeah, thanks for having me. It's funny, I go on a bunch of podcasts and the host is always saying at the beginning, "Oh, we got a good one for you." So like, I don't know, there are a lot of bad episodes there in the not with you. I'm just saying in general in the podcast universe, is that a thing? But
yeah, it's hopefully me foreshadowing a little bit. I guess it's kind of hard for me to say this is going to be a great podcast before I even record the podcast. So yeah, hopefully, y'all, this is going to be a great podcast.
Fingers crossed, everyone. Fingers crossed.
Be a complete fail. We're yet to figure it out here. Well, David, I'm going to go ahead and give a little background introduction on who you are, and then I'll let you fill in the gaps. So you are the founder and the chief sales scientist at Cerebral Selling. You are a 2-time author. You've sold tens of thousands of books, been written in 6 different languages. You recently came out with a new book called The Sales Leader They Need, which I'm very excited to get into. Previous book was Sell the Way You Buy. You are also a keynote speaker. You are a 4-time VP of sales. You've led some high growth sales teams and companies that's things like Salesforce. You even created, what I love about this too, is the Sales Leadership Academy program at Salesforce. And your works have been published in places like the Harvard Business Review, Forbes, Entrepreneur Magazine, Inc. Magazine. I'm not gonna lie, man, I was like, as I was doing the research and being like, okay, let's like figure out this introduction here, I was like, oh shit, this guy's got some good stuff here.
Well, it always sounds good when you say it. I'm always thinking like I'm the guy whose kids are annoyed because I'm always, ragging on them about how they load the dishwasher. Like that doesn't show up in the bio, but that's nevertheless an important part of my, my emotional makeup. So. But yes, it does sound good when you say it. Appreciate it.
So David, just to give a little more context and background, I guess, is there any other gaps that are important to fill in that I missed there besides laying out the amazing accolades that you have or where you live, what your family life is like? What's important for people to know about who truly David Priemer is?
Yeah. Like I always say for most of us who got into the sales game, I got into it by accident, and everyone gets into it by accident because we really don't teach it in school. And everyone's journey is a little different. So I started my career as a research scientist and ended up getting into sales by accident at the turn of the dot-com boom. So the kind of the approach I've kind of taken over the course of the years, I still bring it to my practice today, is like the sense of, I can call it scientific curiosity. Like, why does this happen? Why does that happen? What can I learn and how can I get better and explain this concept with multivariables and all this nuance to people in a way that makes a lot of sense. And so for me, it's first making sense of that in my head. And so that's the kind of, that's the origin story that I kind of tend to bring. But I found that over the years, all the startups and the companies and leadership roles, there's so much to be learned. I'm also a 2-time cancer survivor. I'm a 3-time father. And so I learned just as much about my profession as I do going through those life experiences as I do, the professional experiences. So hopefully, I don't know. I feel like that's part of like I could say like the psychological makeup of what I bring to my practice these days.
I hear so many people talk about powerful tactics and strategies, whether you're in sales or whether you're in leadership, and what people so rarely talk about, or I feel like, are starting to talk about a little bit more, but has overlooked for so long, is that that inner game mental health. I am a person first who is constantly dealing with challenges and in my own work, and trying to experience it so that I can hopefully bring the work to more people. And I think just, from our conversations that we've had and just looking at your background as well is, the story for you hasn't been sunshine and rainbows, and you've been in the trenches quite a bit in many different types of capacities there. And I think that just makes you not just a great teacher, but someone who's walking the walk as well.
Yeah, look, sales is life, life is sales, and the game and the amount of variables that we're playing with have changed so much. Never mind in the last 20 years, talk about the last year and a half. So that's actually what I really enjoy, is kind of seeing how the systems change and being able to adapt to them. And you're right, there's a huge mental game aspect to all of this. Oftentimes we summarize what it takes to be a great salesperson or a great leader, in very simple terms, just be human,
Yes.
whatever that means for you. And it's odd that in this day and age, we have to, kind of give instruction to people on what it means to be human, but such is the case.
Let's not be robots. We need to start differentiating ourselves from these artificial intelligence robots that we got starting to rule the world, and just be a human person. I've got to ask before we dive into some, questions. Cerebral Selling is the company that you are the founder and chief sales scientist of.
Mm-hmm.
I was looking at that and just the name Cerebral right there. I'm curious, how did you come up with that name? Obviously, everybody's got their own origins and things that they got down. How did you come up with that Cerebral Selling name there?
Yeah. If you want to know the real story, and I think that you do, I'll tell you where that came from. So the idea to create a content website started back in my last VP of sales role. So when I was at Salesforce, I worked at Salesforce for 5 years because they acquired my company, my startup. And they liked it when entrepreneurs came in from the outside because they bring different thoughts and perspectives and so on. So they said, do you want to write? And they knew I like to write. Like, do you want to write for the Salesforce blog? I'm like, sure. So I started writing, and the content ended up getting picked up by Forbes and Entrepreneur and all these great outlets. And I was like, oh, this is amazing. So I'll just kind of keep doing it. And then when I left Salesforce to take on a new VP of sales role, people would reach out to me and they'd say, hey, David, do you have some advice for me on A, B, and C? And I would say, sure. But then I was sending you to 25 different websites with all these articles that were posted. I'm like, you know what? I just need my own website to to put all my stuff on. So I started Cerebral Selling just to have a place to store all my content back in the day. And the way I remember the night, I just came up with the name, and where it came from, true story, was my cancer surgeon. So when I had cancer the first time, and I was going through the surgery, and I met with my surgeon afterwards, and he's given, okay, so here's what happened. Here's what we took out. Here's what we found. Here's what we whatever. And he said to me, I know you're a pretty cerebral guy, so I'm going to explain it to you like this. And that cerebral label just stuck with me. So it was actually my cancer surgeon was the first person to call me cerebral, and it just stuck with me because, again, I loved, as a former research scientist, very curious person, I love to kind of think it's both the superpower and the kryptonite. So when I started the website just to have a place to store my stuff, I'm like, oh, Cerebral Selling, that's got a nice ring to it. The URL was available. And so it wasn't even conceived of as a business, just a place to store some of my thoughts. And that's how it came about.
I love it. It's funny. Sometimes we come up with these names where it's not even about, a company or making money or anything like that. It's just like, hey, this is a passion of mine. I want to get this message out that I really care about. And then, it comes out, and it's all of a sudden it's like, oh, there's something here and people want more of it. And I actually think there's something more. It's like you get this download and it's like, oh,
I'll tell you, I'll combine some of the things we've been talking about so far. It's like, well, what's the mission and what's the secret to being great at sales and leader? And I said, just kind of be human. And I was talking to a great leader that I work with and coach in one of my leadership programs today. And I don't know, the topic kind of, came onto my business and my practice. And I said, I'm not one of these people that make 6 figures in 30 days or lose 20 pounds in 2 weeks, or here's the outcome that you're trying to drive. Because I actually believe in my practice, I'm not selling you the outcome. the outcome in general. If you're trying to solve a problem, you're a leader, you're an entrepreneur, whoever you are, you want to be in a great relationship. You know what you want. You know that I want to be loved. I want to have fulfillment. I want to make this much money. I want to, run a marathon. You know what you want. You don't need me to tell you that. The problem is that you don't know why you can't get what you want. In the face of all of this knowledge and tactics, if I said, hey, Alex, you want to get in shape, you want to run an Ironman triathlon, and that was a goal of yours, I said, what do you think? If you wanted to do that, Alex, that was a goal of yours, what would you do? How would you prepare?
I'd find a coach and I'd develop a plan in terms of how to make sure to do that.
Yeah. So you have a plan. You're like, okay, I'm going to eat right. I'm going to exercise. I'm going to do all this kind of stuff. And maybe it works or maybe it doesn't, right? But you don't need me to tell you what to do. You already know what to do. What you need me to tell you, about is why the thing that you tried to do in the face of all the knowledge of how to achieve that result, why weren't you able to achieve it? What's the problem? Why can't you get what you want? And for so many of us in sales and leadership, we say, okay, look, I want to help my team sell more. I want to sell more of my products and services. I want to grow my business. I want to help my team grow. You know what you want. I don't need to sell you that. What you don't know is why you can't get what you want. And so I was talking about this with the leader, my practice, my mission is not as much around, I'm going to help you achieve the result. You're going to sell more. You're going to lead better. That's kind of the downstream.
It's the byproduct.
The byproduct of the behaviors, which is I'll teach you how to be more human. I'm going to teach you how to execute these tactics with more conviction. I'm going to teach you the pathways by which human beings actually make purchasing decisions, so you can align your sales motion, your narrative, your leadership motion that way. And not only am I going to show you, I'm going to prove to you with science and research and data that this is so that you're not just taking my word for it. And armed with that knowledge, you will be able to go out and execute in a much more powerful, authentic, and human way. And that's the outcome. The byproduct is the revenue and all that kind of stuff, right? It's you want to get in shape. It's the mental game. It's the discipline, the weight, the shape. That's the byproduct. And I believe it's the same thing in the way we practice.
So I have a question for you, David. You speak a lot about, it's funny. I actually loved how you just said this earlier too. You're as a founder, it's hard to sometimes turn my brain off, even kind of talking about that cerebral word right there. And you are always thinking about it. And that's a beautiful thing because you have such a profound mission that you are driving, that you are impacting people with. And also at the same time, you have a family and you also want to get rest, not just rest from laying your head on a pillow, but just hey, can I turn off my brain just a little bit to allow myself some space to integrate here? And I guess I'm just curious because, I think for so many, whether you call it top sales reps or you call it, great sales leaders, founders, you name it, how does one balance the combination of, yes, let's go out, let's achieve, let's be thinking about it, let's be creating, let's do all of this, or also complementing that with, I need to find some spaciousness, turn that off and actually be present with my kids. And I asked you this question because it's not easy. And I also recognize this is probably a big part of your work, right? The thing that you are trying to figure out how to do on your own. And so it's a question that you might not have the perfect answer because you're still the answer isn't. So I'm just curious, how do you balance hey, let's be a high achiever and let's also enjoy this current moment and not be having to work so hard all the time?
Yeah, when you figure that out, let me know. No, it's tough. Oftentimes people will ask, well, how do you balance it with your kids or your family? Because the reality is, being a startup guy, most of your people talk about work-life balance. If you're a startup person, you've kind of signed up for not balance. That's what you signed up for, right? If you're a solopreneur or you're just starting a practice, it takes time and effort to do that. So it's not going to be a 50-50 split of your time. My best advice, make time for yourself. I love to take vacations. I don't take them as often as I should, but I do take them, and I force myself to take them. I think that's important. Be there for the big things, for your kids, for your family, for your spouse, your partner. I never miss the big things. I also work from home in general, so that I'm here, when my oldest is in college, so she's kind of moved away. She comes back every now and then. But like for my other kids, I'm here when they're here. I love to cook. So I always, try to like protect that dinner time, hour or period of time for my family, and kind of lean into that. I try to leave my phone out of arm's reach as much as I can, because this, if you're just a human, you instinctively reach for your phone, you go to the bathroom, you go for a walk, you're walking upstairs. Like, we can't have a period of 2 seconds where we're not entertained now. So you have to do things that are kind of, deliberate, to kind of reclaim some of that time. My other piece of advice is that, and this is, so I've never kind of synthesized this before, I kind of explained this, but like, people are watching you like all the time. And so, and specifically, I think about like my kids. Even though I don't, from an hour's perspective, spend the same amount of time with them as I do, on work, I've had these like small little epiphanies where, they're looking at you, your kids, your partner, like people around are looking at you. And it became clear to me when I wrote my first book. It came out 4 years ago, and my kids ended up. Hold on, I'm gonna show you something. Okay, So my kids ended up making me this like novelty card.
Oh man, it's like the cover of your book right there.
Yeah, it's the cover of my book, and they turned it into like this big card, and they wrote these nice messages. And I mean, they were 4 years younger then, and that was kind of the first point. Then the second point was when their friends ask them, "What does your dad do?" Which is like a weird thing, because it's like you're not an astronaut and you're not a hairstylist. So what does he do? It's hard to explain when you're in sales what you do. And so they said, well, he has his own business and he teaches, but like he wrote a book. Hold on a second. Like go on to Amazon and they'll look on Amazon. Like you see, like here's his books. They're on Amazon. And the books became like a very tangible thing for them, where they were able to say, look, this is a thing. My gosh, not a lot of people have books, and it feels like it's a hard thing to do, but Dad did the hard thing, and here it is. And it normalizes the hard thing for them. And so I say, as like a super cerebral tip, like, how do you achieve that balance? Sure, all those things I said, making dinner, making time, taking vacations, but also like be mindful and proud about what it is that you do, because people are watching. And you have the ability to kind of influence. I mean, my kids being proud of me writing a book doesn't help me, take vacation. And, but when you think about like, what's your mission? My mission is to, raise wonderful children and human beings that go on to do great things, and to make my family proud, my parents proud. And, even though some of these things you do are in solitude and they're hard work, they nonetheless impact your life and the people around you. And be mindful of that, because that's very powerful as well.
It's a profound message, because what I'm hearing in that, you care about something. You care about something, you work your ass off for it. And yes, creating space for yourself and, being present with your kids and making dinner with them is important. But what I hear more importantly that is like, hey, Dad isn't just a guy who just works so he has to work, and then he comes home and then he's with, his family. It's not a check the box. I do this so I can make money for my family. Yes, that's important. Again, it's a byproduct of it. Your kids are having someone that they look at like, you know what? What this life is about is you freaking go for something. You actually have to work your ass off for it. And that, sure, it might sacrifice some time with them, I would assume, but they're learning a powerful lesson of, oh, wow, that's what life's actually about. Is pursuing something great and something that's actually meaningful for you. And, I hate to say it, that ain't common. Not common.
Well, it's funny. I talk about this a lot in my practice, and this is a good, we'll get to this in the context of your theme of the rising leader. But I'll tell you, being a being a leader and a manager, hiring hundreds of people over the years, I realized, look, there can be only so many A players and, the B players and so on. Like, not everyone's the best. I get that. You always want to get the best people. But on the flip side, being a trainer, a practitioner, teacher, and I look at my students and I've learned, and this is kind of a funny thing, like, not everyone wants to be good. Not everyone who's in front of you, who even pays you money to be good at something, is intrinsically motivated to want to be good. And the problem is that if you're not motivated, I mean, look, live your life, right? But if you're not motivated to be good, then A, you're not going to be successful at the things you want, whatever it is. I'm not talking monetary success, but whatever you want to be successful at, you're not going to be successful. And B, especially in a profession like sales, you're going to just end up ruining sales for everyone else and leadership, because you're going to go out there and you're going to do it the wrong way.
Just enough.
And you're going to make your constituents, your team members, your customers not like you and think that, like, oh, I don't want to, associate with people like this. So not everyone wants to be good. I say, whatever you choose to do, for God's sakes, like, just try to be good at that.
Just care about it. That's all it is.
That's it.
And that's a good segue into your new book, The Sales Leader They Need. And in it, you go over some powerful skill sets and traits that help you unlock a team's potential, right? How to actually create somebody who's not just great at their job, but actually someone who's coming from the right energy, who cares, who's motivated right there. And I'd love for you to go into, you talk sometimes a little bit about the 5 critical skill sets necessary for this. And I'd love for you to expand on, what is that? What are those things that they need?
Yeah, well, I kind of start from the beginning. And in my practice, I ask leaders, and I talk about this in the book, and I say, like, think about the best sales leader you ever had, or the best leader you ever had, right? And I want you to see if you can picture that person. And most people can think of that person very quickly. And now I want you to answer the question, what was it about that leader that made them the best that you ever had? What was it about them? And this is a real exercise that I do. So as you're thinking about this, you're out there listening, think about, like, who was the best leader I ever had? What was it about them that made them so great? I go to the whiteboard. I'm like, I'm just going to write down everything you say. You tell me, like, hit me with all your stuff, right? So I've done this exercise hundreds of times. And everything that people say falls into 2 main categories. Number one, which you already said, they cared about me. They just cared about me as a person. And number 2 was, they helped me grow. I flourished personally and professionally underneath them. So, they cared about me. They pushed me. They were transparent. They were open. They were honest. They challenged me. They gave me tough love. They held me accountable for the stuff that I said I was going to do. Like, all of that is, falls into those categories. And so, and what's interesting, as I say in the book as well, what don't you hear? You don't hear things like, they were the best at sales, or they were the best at the job that I was doing and taught me everything I know about the job. That might have been true, but that's not what people recognize when they pick out the best leader they ever had. And so the book is about these 5 skills. I say, okay, great. If you want to be that leader that you would fight to work with, that teams would fight to work with, what is it that you need to do? And by the way, we talk about the inputs versus the outputs, the byproducts. I said, for the best leader you ever had, how did you show up for that person? Did you try really hard, or did you phone it in every day? They would be like, oh my gosh, I would run through a brick wall for Alex, right? And so this idea that if we can be that kind of leader who cares, who helps our people grow, we will unlock what I refer to as this discretionary effort, like this extra level of effort. If I asked you, Alex, maybe not you, Alex, but a regular person, like, how hard are you trying at your job on a scale of 1 to 10? 10 being, oh, I got, the company's logo tattooed on my arm, and 1 is like, I'm going to resign tomorrow. Most people are not a 10 or a 9, maybe not even an 8, right? So that means that there's more. You can give more. How do I get more out of you? So that's what the thesis of the book is all about. And then I go into those 5 specific skills, which I'm happy to go into now if you like.
Well, I guess I'm curious. You got to care about somebody. You got to help them grow. Yes, I hear you there. But how, is that just innate? Is somebody, who's a sales leader, I'll reference myself here. It's like, I started leading teams back in 2018, and I've, led many different types of teams through various types of companies. And yes, I wanted to produce great results. Obviously I wanted to hit quota, I wanted to make money, but I also really cared of I want them to be fired up to be there. I wanted to invest into them as a holistic person, get them, in essence, I want them to feel just fucking alive. That was kind of the goal. I want you to feel alive and excited to be here. And that was also something that I just simply wanted myself, right? I wanted my leader to invest into me, to make me feel those things there. And that really became my thesis there. But is that innate for me? Is that just how I am? Or is teaching somebody how to care more, teaching somebody how to help their people grow, is that a teachable skill set? Or is that just something that's you just got to figure out how to tap into that energy within you?
There is a shift because oftentimes people are promoted into positions of leadership because they are really good individual contributors. And they mistakenly fall into the trap of thinking, okay, well, if I just keep doing more of what I was doing before as an individual contributor and teach my team how to do that, then, that's the end game. And that is not the case. I mean, you have all these, elite, looking in sports, elite players coached by amazing coaches who are not as good as them, at playing the game. And so that's the trap people fall into. But then also, and the reason why, obviously I focused on sales leadership in my career, different than just regular leadership, because the pressures that a sales leader is under are, I would argue, far greater than any other kind of leadership that exists in a company. You have huge revenue responsibility, especially in growth companies. People are looking at you to deliver the number. You have an extremely transparent success metric.
Yeah, you either did it or you didn't.
You did it or you didn't.
Pretty obvious.
If you're in support, product engineering, you do not have the same level of scrutiny. So what happens is when times are tricky and we're trying to achieve the result and we have all this pressure on us, it's very tempting and quite common for leaders to regress back to a much more primitive and directive form of leadership where it's like, hey, you know what? I'll care about you some other time. Right now, I really need you to close this deal and deliver this revenue to me. And it's very easy to fall back into that trap, especially if we're not clear on, what our, what skills we really need to be leaning on in order to achieve the result we're looking for. So it's, to your question, it's not innate. It's not hard. Just like most skills are not hard to understand, doesn't mean we can do them on demand or we do them consistently. But no, it's not innate, especially for people who have been promoted into the world of sales leadership.
I do believe there is a massive shift, similar to what you said, of this is becoming not just a nice to have any longer. This is becoming a need to have. Sales reps, corporations, they're looking for something more. It's not good enough any longer just to be making a lot of money. Yes, many reps want to be making a lot of money. There's no doubt about that. But people are now wanting something so much more. They want meaning. They want community. They want to feel, just like you said, they want to be growing. And maybe in, I always kind of like to reference the 2018 timeframe because that was a certain era of tech sales where if you didn't have meaning and you didn't have community, but you were making a lot of money, you were good. Awesome. But now it's just people are making that a must have. And it's just an evolving world with that.
100%. I mean, look, I think about it in my practice, when you start your own business, where I was saying to you earlier, the first thing you think about is, I hope someone pays me to do anything. You're living your life outside the matrix, or you're not working for a company anymore. And then, you gratefully get to do that. You make money, you have impact. And for me nowadays, the biggest thrill for me is when a stranger who I don't know reaches out to me on the internet and says, hey, David, I read your book and I loved what you said about A, B, and C, or it really resonated with me, or I read it on a plane. So these strangers become friends, and you realize that the thing that has been bouncing around in your head for all these years that you finally synthesized and put into like a work is helping someone. That's the best. I don't know. I can't describe it. People say, like, why do you write books? I'm not like writing Harry Potter here to make $1 bajillion off the royalties in the movie and all that kind of stuff. It's, we do it for the impact.
Yeah.
And, I also believe that the right leaders also get in it for the impact, because the reality is if your goal was to make money, you wouldn't be a leader. You would just be an individual contributor, because as an individual contributor, you can quadruple and smash your quota. As a sales leader, it's very easy to hit 80% of your number and very hard to hit more than 120% of your number because there's all these variables and people below you. So I believe you do it for the impact.
Yes.
So transferring that to your team and kind of helping them see the impact of their work, I think, is one of the best things that you can do as a leader.
As part of that, one of the things I love that you've shared through just your content, through even looking at your website, is arming reps to have high conviction conversations. High conviction conversations, especially as sales is continuing to evolve, as AI is getting in there, as 80% of the sales process is done by the time they have that first conversation with the sales rep because they know all this information already. High conviction conversations. I would love for you to double down on that. What does that actually mean?
Mm-hmm. This is one of my favorite topics because it's the intersection of sales and life. So where this first came from, when I was at Salesforce, I was running small business sales for the Eastern US. And I would have all of these young, enthusiastic reps that used to be SDRs and BDRs that were promoted into kind of, one of their first closing roles, so to speak. And they were fearless. They would make calls, emails, the whole thing. But oftentimes I would have reps with tons of activity and no pipeline. So I would have no recourse but to just, all right, let me just listen to Alex. I'm just going to listen to some of your calls and see if I can pick up on something that you might be saying or doing. And now, put a pin in that for a second. Now I'm a parent and I have my kids coming to me and hitting me up for all sorts of things on a daily basis. And if you have kids, or you've ever babysat kids, or you have nieces, nephews, like, if you can imagine what it sounds like when a child is about to hit you up for something they think you're going to say no to, right? You can feel it. Mm. You can feel the lack of conviction and confidence. Mm. They think you're going to say no to it. And as I'm listening to these young reps on the phone with customers, and I'm not even listening for the words, I'm just listening for tone. I'm like, you sound like you're bothering this customer. You sound like one of my kids when they're about to hit me up for something and think I'm going to say no to. There's no confidence. There's no conviction. And you know why? I get it. Because if I can use just a juvenile reference here for a second, you're a kid and we asked you to call a grown-up whose job you've never done to tell them about the future of whatever. I get how you struggle to manifest the confidence and conviction. But manifesting that confidence and conviction is so important because the confidence and conviction and the feeling your customers get transcends the words that you use. Either you believe in what I'm telling you or you don't believe. It's a binary feeling. We over-index way too much on the value proposition, the business case. Meanwhile, at the end of the day, the science, God bless the science, has proven and shown us that people buy feelings 100% of the time. And conviction is one of those things that we can transmit. It's a feeling we can transmit to customers where they believe that we are the ones that can help them. So that's why conviction is so important.
I love that. It's funny. I even felt your conviction even more in how you were saying that because of how much you believe it. And I all of a sudden felt myself being like, oh man, like I'm loving this right here.
Oh yeah. Look, I've said this lots of times. Sometimes I'll be in a session, a keynote or whatever, and I'll pause and I'm like, can you tell that I love what I do? Mm-hmm. People are like, yeah. I'm like, I'm not fishing for compliments. How can you tell? And they say, oh, you seem really passionate. You seem to know a lot about, you have a lot of data and you have a lot of, evidence. And we just get this feeling from you. I'm like, okay, great. Look, I'm glad you can get that from me. I love what I do. When you go out there and you're trying to sell your product or service or lead your team, you think they can tell if you believe in what you're doing? So believing in what we're doing is really important. The problem is that I can't just tell you to believe in what you're doing and you will. I need to give you a system. It's the same thing with like the sales leader they need. I believe, Alex, that you can care for your team and you can help them grow. So what are the tactics? What are the skills that I need to use and learn and cultivate to manifest that feeling? That's where the magic happens. And it happens in sales as it does in leadership.
I've talked about this on this podcast before, but I think it's worth mentioning again. Have you heard of the 7-38-55 rule?
Why don't you hit me with it?
Essentially, it's of your influence ability, 7% of your influence are the words that you say. Only 7%. 38% of your influence comes from your tonality, right? And, Chris Voss never split the difference, calls the late night DJ voice, right? Are you actually speaking from that lower tonality? And 55% comes from your energy, your body posture and your energy there. And so often, what I'm hearing just in what you're saying, the people who, hey, you have a lot of activities that you're doing, but you got zero pipeline, they're trying to simply use words to close deals, use words to prospect. And they're missing out on 93% of what they can actually be using to make it happen there. And actually having that conviction right there, it's even what you said. It's like, I don't mentally understand that you have conviction. I feel your conviction. Like it's a transmission coming off of you. It's coming off through your tonality. It's coming off through your body posture. You stood up more. Your heart opened a little bit more. Your energy was excited. Like, I kind of even felt the back of my, the hairs on the back of my neck kind of go up a little bit. I'm like, oh yeah, like we're talking about stuff here. Yeah. And it's just, but what you spoke to that I love, it's like you're getting people to care about something. And that naturally causes conviction to come through. And the hard part about sales leadership is, yes, you can tell everybody what you care about. You can tell everybody about what, the company is doing and the company's mission. And that's important. But also each individual person also has a unique reason about why they are there. Maybe they want to eventually start their own company. Maybe they just want to be able to provide for their family well. Maybe they're trying to, solve this massive problem that your product can solve or whatever it might be. But it takes the sales leader actually figuring out, cool, why are you and you specifically here? And let's continually tie back all the sales activities, all the conversations, all the deal reviews that we're doing back to we're getting that need met right there.
100%. And I would add, like, it's funny. I have a part of my practice dedicated to foundational sales execution and part to sales leadership. And in a way you can see, okay, they're kind of related, but the principles themselves are so intertwined. Back to your point about if I can help unlock an individual's why and connect their actions to where they want to go in their career and how working at this job helps them do that, then they're going to be a lot more engaged, happier, and the result will be achieved. That's the exact same thing that happens when you go and you try to service a customer, not by focusing on your product, but on their problem. And this is where I spend so much of my practice on the foundational sales side, telling customers, stop pitching your product. Stop pitching the value. Stop pitching the benefits. No one cares what the heck the thing looks like on the screen. You need to focus all of your conversations on the problem the customer is looking to solve and why they cannot solve that problem on their own. That's the qualifier now, because in an environment where people don't want to spend money, budgets are tight, the propensity is for people to think, oh yeah, Alex, I know I have this problem, but don't worry. Like you want to train for the triathlon? Like, I know what to do. David, don't worry. I'm gonna sleep. I'm gonna eat right. I'm gonna exercise. And you'll fail, right? And so my job is to not only sell the problem, but also like why you can't solve the problem on your own. Just like as a leader, my job is to solve for you and what you want to do in your career, not my product, which is the quota that I need to hit. If I solve for you, the byproduct is you will put the discretionary effort into achieving the quota. Just like as a customer, if I can describe the problem better than and clearer than it exists in your own mind and why you haven't been able to solve it, then of course you're going to buy my product.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But that's the output. Focus on the product, focus on the person. Both things will be achieved.
Mm-hmm. I relate it so much to myself. Obviously I run retreats, and we have a year-long program that people join from these retreats, and we have almost 40 people in them. And the thing is, I'm not selling our year-long program. If I'm like, okay, we have weekly calls, we do one-on-one coaching, you have additional retreats to go to, you have a Slack community, it's like, the more I sell that, the more people are just like, ugh. But if I'm selling hey, here's where you're at, here's the problems that you're experiencing, here's why it's hard to fix those problems on your own. And also then here's the transformation that you could potentially have 1 year from now if you are committed to this journey here. I don't care whatever, whether it's weekly calls or, a 10-day silent meditation retreat that I'm selling, people are going to say, oh, I'm into that transformation. And I'm also into figuring out how to solve this damn problem that I haven't been able to figure out how to solve on my own. That's when that change starts to happen right there.
Mm-hmm.
So I really resonate deeply with what you said there.
Love it.
So here's one of my final questions here for you, David.
Mm-hmm.
And we've covered a lot of really good stuff here. As a leader, you talk a lot about transparency. And transparency is incredibly important, especially to just build a level of trust amongst the sales team. How is a leader actually supposed to be transparent when all hell is breaking loose? When maybe even they have a personal issue, like you can't break trust of showing them too much, or else they're going to, not believe in the mission of where everybody's going. But this idea of transparency is important. How does a sales leader actually bring that through, especially through particularly difficult times?
Yeah, it's funny. So my first company, I was a young leader. I had a team of 21 people, and my first company was acquired. And the acquisition was a bit of a train wreck. They fired a bunch of people. Like, it wasn't great. And I kind of tried to put on a brave face for my team. And I thought that was how we were going to get through. I was going to like, hey, everyone, I know there's a bunch of stuff going on, but I think ultimately this is going to work out. And there was a marketing director that a lot of my team was friends with that came to her and said, hey, you know what, we don't think David is being honest with us. Like, we think he's worried. We think he sees the same crap that we do. And he's trying to put on a brave face. So she comes to me and she tells me this, and she was 100% right. So it's a lesson I take to this day, which is, when you're going through a tough time, and maybe there's some tough stuff happening with you personally, your team wants to know what you think. Putting on a brave face and saying, oh, I'm clear and everything is good, like, it erodes the confidence that your team actually has in you. That doesn't mean you need to overshare and tell them all of your deepest, darkest secrets. Painting things just as they are, not any better, not any worse, being honest about how you feel, certainty, which is a big concept I talk about in both my books. This idea that in the face of uncertainty, because your brain is a prediction machine designed to keep you safe, your brain makes up all these answers. It's like when you're waiting for a medical test and it's been a couple of weeks and you haven't heard back from the doctor. You went on a date and it's been a few days and the person didn't call you back. Your brain starts filling in the blanks with all these things. And so I think about when you're going through a tough time, be honest with your team about how you feel, because they want to know, and they can tell if you're being disingenuous and you will lose their trust. Never do that. But then also fall back on this sense of certainty, like create certainty for your team where possible. Highlight what you know, highlight what you don't know, highlight where some of their feelings are valid and where some of their feelings should be reframed in the context of fact. Because we all tend to let our emotions rule us. I have this conversation, I'll tell you, and I'll leave this with you. As a cancer survivor, you're always part of, like, a friend of mine who wrote a book, who was a 6-time or 5-time cancer survivor. He wrote a book about the cancer journey. He calls it the Cancer Club. When you're in the Cancer Club, it's a lifetime membership. You never get to leave. And so every year or sooner, you're always going for tests and scans and making sure that you're staying healthy and so on. And as much as I go through all those things, every time I get a test or a scan and I'm waiting for the results, I am not cool. I am waiting. I'm anxious. And it's my wife who says, it's going to be okay. And I'm not just saying that because I'm trying to make you feel better. I'm trying to say that because it's been years and everything has been okay. And so you are unnecessarily worried in the face of facts to the contrary. And so I say that it's the same thing for our teams. You create certainty where you can, be transparent about how you feel, create certainty and in the face of, but see things how they are, frame things in the face of facts. Don't let people's imaginations run wild, tether them and be that voice of reason. So anyways, there's a lot wrapped up in there. There's a lot more in the transparency chapter, but that's what I would say in tough times like this for sure.
Powerfully said. Well, last question here for you, David. First off, before that question, I just want to acknowledge you, man. Thank you for just showing up and being raw, being real, sharing, your conviction here, and also just, having such a powerful message that so many are receiving strong advice from that they can apply to sales as well as their teams. And so here's my last question for you. The show is obviously called the Rising Leader Podcast. What do you view, David, as the rising leader?
I go back to kind of how we started. The rising leader is someone who is eternally curious, who's always learning. I feel like if you need to rise, it's not about doing the same things over and over again. It's about always learning, treating this like a craft, taking it seriously, learning how to moderate your behaviors as times change, as you learn new things, and always be rising. Never stop learning. The second you stop, the world will change and you'll be left behind. So that's what I think about. In a way, we're all, we said this right off the top before we started recording. We were talking about just, entrepreneurs in our businesses. And I said, no one's got it figured out. Everyone's in some stage of learning and growing and figuring it out. And I believe that's the same thing with leaders as well.
I love it. Well, David, if people want to get a hold of you, what is the best way to do so?
Yeah, my website, as we said off the top, cerebralselling.com, has all the coordinates. I'm a friendly guy generally, so you're welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn as well. Say that you heard me on the Rising Leader podcast. And the books, Sell the Way You Buy is the first one, and The Sales Leader They Need is the second one, available on Amazon or wherever you get books.
I love it. Well, David, thank you so much, my friend. And for all those who dropped in with us, appreciate you being here. And I know you know somebody who needs to hear this. So please make sure you subscribe and send this along to them. And with that, have a wonderful day. David, thank you again, my friend.
Thanks, Alex, for having me. Great to be with you.
Thanks for listening to the Rising Leader Podcast. Make sure you hit that follow button so you get notified every time a new episode releases. If you know someone who wants to take their lives and their career to the next level, send them this episode so we can all rise together. For more information, check out alluviance.co. We'll see you next time. And in the meantime, keep letting it flow.